Buskers. I'm Copper Kelly, and you're welcome to the Folkin Around podcast, your favourite country music podcast. Now, you might notice Jodie's not with me right now. We couldn't figure out a good time to record. There's lots of things going on, but don't fear, she's still on the podcast. All good that way. But I'm just going to record this intro to the interview that myself and Jodie recorded a few weeks ago, where we talked to the singer-songwriter from Dublin, that is Colm Gavin, and we talked about his days busking and fighting for places on the street corner, and he has a good few stories from that time. And also he has a singer-songwriter partnership with a very well-known and renowned songwriter, but we'll let him tell you about that in the interview. But before we get to the interview, I'd just like to ask you, if you want to help support the podcast, share and tell your friends, let people know about us. And also, we're on buymeacoffee.com. It's a kind of like a Patreon alternative, where you can just go and give us a few pound or whatever, or a few euros, I say. If you want to help us support and help us pay the hosting fees and this kind of crack, keep it up and running. And also just a membership there. So we'll be adding to that now in the near future. We'll have bonus episodes and a few extra bonus goodies for members. And so basically, help us get this podcast out to people. Leave a review on podcast apps like Apple Music and so on. But I'll say no more about that kind of shameless promotion. We'll get to the, as I say, without further ado, we'll get to the interview. I'll talk to you after.
So we are delighted to be joined by the wonderful Colm Gavin. Colm, you're very welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Pleasure to be here at last. I know this is long overdue for the three of us to meet up and have a bit of a chat.
Oh, it really has. And for anybody that's sort of listening in on the audio or watching through our YouTube, anybody that might not have heard of you before or met you before, why don't you give yourself a bit of a brief intro?
So my name is Colm Gavin. I suppose I studied music through the classical method in the Clondalkin School of Music under the great Peter Stanton. When I was about 15, I, as so many other singer-songwriters did, embarked into the unknown realms and pleasures of busking. I started in the Square in Temple Bar, moved up to playing in Grafton Street. I was in a couple of college bands, in and out of school, and went solo in 2014. And in September of 2014, I brought out my debut EP, which was called Your Endless Slumber, which got to number 1 in the Irish singer-songwriter charts. And I think beyond that point, I think that was when I kind of came on to the wider Irish music populace's radar, so to speak.
I feel like I covered everything. Like, that's the podcast for today, guys.
Look, see you next week.
Goodbye. It was fun.
Oh, that's a good varied history there. Like, you're busking on Temple Bar. And I assume you'd have some good stories from your time there.
Oh, Copper. The ones that I can tell. It was an amazing time, but it was a very different time. I was 15 in the summer of 2007. I sound like I'm like, back in my day, we had this stuff called coffee and it came in a cup.
So the thing is, when you say that, I just feel really old to thinking how old I was in 2007.
But that's the thing, Jodie. Like, the time, I don't know where the time goes, but that summer, I remember I summoned up the courage to start busking. And the whole idea at the time was just to make enough money so I could go to Freebird Records and buy Beatles CDs or Bob Dylan CDs or whatever. So I used to play outside a place called the Eager Beaver. And I don't know the gentleman's name who used to run the place, but he, or even if he did run the place, but he used to work, he was a cashier. And I used to sing just outside the window, and God love him, I'd say, listen to me for a few hours is enough to push it over the edge. But now and again, he would leave me a small cup of tea and 2 John Player cigarettes, which you wouldn't do today for a 15-year-old, but or anybody for that matter. But and we would chat intermittently. And some of the best performance advice I ever got was from him when he said, "You're out here playing for everyone except you. That's the whole idea. This isn't to please your ego. This isn't for your enjoyment. When you're on the street, you need to consider everybody except you. So you might love Bob Dylan, you might love Van Morrison, you might love the Beatles, but not every passerby does. And you need to be a little bit more considerate of what the casual listener would appreciate. And if you do that, you'll start to make money." And sure enough, it started to happen. So the big song of that summer was Hey There Delilah by the Plain White T's.
Oh, yeah.
And that was one of the first ones that I learned. You remember that one?
Yeah.
And people would stop as if by magic. Now, it didn't happen all the time, but it was a very early education in the idea that when you're on the street, busking is the great leveler, in that nobody is there to see you. They're just passing by. It's a conveyor belt. And if they stop and if they give you a coin, it's validation of some description. So yeah, there's plenty of stories I could tell you, but that's probably the most educational PC one.
Yeah.
And how was it with everyone else that busks as well? Because I obviously haven't gone busking myself, but I've had some experience with John Garrity, who's the Belfast busker, and when he's sort of come over here and things. And what I found amazing was I thought there would be a lot of competitiveness amongst all the people that are busking. Because you literally in Liverpool, for example, over here, you can't walk down the street. You do a couple of steps, you're at your next busker and your next one. But they're so respectful of each other. And did you find that as well? Was there a community there like that?
Nope. No, there is.
Really?
But back then, I got swung for more times than I could tell you. I mean, and back then, copper. I mean, back then it was it's the law of the jungle, because nowadays they have performers, the little dog tags they wear around their neck, their licenses, their busking licenses. Back then it was just find a spot, but you could be taking a guy's spot who's been doing it for 25 years and you just don't know yet because you're this young, scrappy upstart. And I remember one particular week, I don't know if it was that summer, it could have been the following summer, and this guy came around the corner. This again was outside the Eager Beaver, and just started swinging wildly. And I was like, what is going on? And I thought he was trying to rob me. And he was like, what are you doing? This is my spot. Who the are you?
Yeah.
And it was quite terrifying. Nowadays, there's much more of a sense of community. So I totally get what you're saying, Jodie. But back then, it was the law of the jungle. Now, there's a lot of people who say it wasn't like that. That was my experience. I probably peeved off the wrong people and was stepping on people's toes. But certainly, I feel like today, there's much more of a sense of sharing and much more of a sense of community amongst younger musicians, especially in Dublin, where there isn't that sense of, here, this is my spot and shove off kind of thing. There's more of a welcoming environment, which certainly when I started out, it wasn't there. And that's got to be a good thing.
Yeah. And I imagine from that sort of experience, it means that you can play a gig anywhere now. The roughest of bars or anything, you'll be there, no problem.
Oh, God. I mean, there was some story. I used to play a regular gig. I don't even know if I can tell this story. I used to play a regular gig
course you can.
on the north side of Dublin. I won't say where. It was in a hotel. And one particular night, there was a darts tournament. Lads who had been playing a darts tournament, and they were all staying in this hotel. And my God, Copper, it was, I'm not even going to say what part of the country they were from. It doesn't matter. The point was, it was bedlam. And my old pal Kyle Roach was doing sound for me this particular night. And he said, if we get out of here without a piece of the equipment broken or one of your bones broken, we'll be doing all right. And there was just I just remember being, now I've had a few like that, but that particularly stands out. And like you were saying, Jodie, you go back to that whole busking logic of, okay, how do you appease the masses here? What songs are going to help just keep the spirits high, I suppose, But I think busking, like I said, it's a great leveler. Nobody's there to see you. And you have to deal with everything. You have to deal with potentially being robbed, which thankfully no one ever got away with that. You have to deal with just the good and the bad. Hens parties, stags parties, the casual observer, the guy on the way to the office, the news correspondent, the DJ, all that kind of stuff.
Would you do it again now, though?
If I had my life to live over, or if I was to do it tomorrow?
No, would you just, if you just, the opportunity, would it just be something you would consider?
Yeah, like every Christmas, I do this thing in Clondalkin. It's called the Ciarán Carr Christmas Busk. And what we do is I gather a bunch of Clondalkin musicians together, and we go out into Main Street with our guitars and our banjos and everything, and sing for our friend. My friend Ciarán Carr passed away in 2012 of sudden adult death syndrome, and his mother and father have set up the Ciarán Carr Foundation as a means to let his memory live on, but also to help people who could find themselves in a similar situation. And every Christmas, about 2 days before Christmas, we all go out into Main Street, Clondalkin, and about 100 or 200 people show up. They give what they can, and that's what we do. So there are times like I find myself back being the street urchin again, and it's fun.
Yeah,
it's fun.
Does it give you like a little bit of a sense of reminding you where you've come from almost?
Absolutely. And I think that's important that, you have something in your life that grounds you, that reminds you you're never more than a few steps away from being back playing on the street. And I think it keeps you sharp too.
And how did you progress then from that lively atmosphere of playing on the street in the moment to people then to go into like the studio setting? How did you find that?
All of these things happened. Like I would have thought, Copper, when I started busking, that these things would happen naturally, and they did. You'd meet people, you meet like-minded musicians, you get in bands with different people, whether it's cover bands or original bands. And I suppose like opportunities just show up, whether it's winning a contest and getting free studio time or whatever. But I think in the beginning, I remember radio sessions were a nightmare, because from busking, you get what I call busker's arm and busker's jaw, which is you just shout everything. Because nowadays they've got like these professional condenser mics and stuff. But back then, there was no plug in and play. It was just go out, pick a good spot. I used to sing under the awning at the Gaiety on South King Street, because that, with the way the sound would travel, it would bounce up and travel out. So we had kind of a little. That's pretty much it. Yeah.
So then when
you couldn't hide,
studio,
you had to just properly use the voice though.
Yeah. So you had to rein it back in then. Yeah, you had to rein it back in the studio setting. So you released your first EP, when was it, 2016 you said?
2014. Yeah, that was my first year that I went solo. Yeah. And
you start writing your own songs and kept going that way.
Writing my own songs and going that way. Yeah, I mean, pretty much. Like I'd been in bands up until that point, but being in a band is like everything has to go before committee, as you know. And when you're solo, you can at least make the decision that, okay, well, I at least don't have to go to 5 other people and say, what do we think of this song? And then you get 3 who say, I like it, and 2 who say, oh, it sounds a little bit too much, like whatever, which can be a nightmare, you know, from a creative standpoint. So going solo was liberating, to say the least, Copper.
Yeah.
And the songwriting part of it, when did that come in? Is it something you've always been into? Have you always been somebody that would scribble things down and not know what to do with them? Or what was your process like?
I was about 15. Myself and the family went on this holiday to a place called Delphi. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's an adventure centre between Mayo and Galway. And you do things like kayaking, rock climbing, and you know that thing where they tie the bungee cord to you, and you zip lines, all that type of stuff.
Wow.
And I was 15, and like I loved Arthur Rimbaud and French surrealist poets, and I had just started to smoke. And I probably thought I was way cooler than I know I thought I was way cooler than I was. But I brought these books of poetry, and I would just I'd be like, you go and do all that type of stuff. I'm going to sit in my room and brood over these lines that I've written. And I used to go for these long walks in the hills. This is truth. That's how sad I was. Used to go for these long walks in the hills, and I would read like Dylan Thomas. And I just got really into this idea. And I remember I brought my guitar down that summer, and I got really into this idea of what is the structure of a song? What goes into making it, like verse, chorus, middle 8, chorus, end, or whatever. Yeah. And I just studied the records of people like Leonard Cohen and the Beatles, Jackson Browne, Warren Zevon, the Eagles, and was just fascinated. And I would write out, like, so Lion Eyes, you know, how does it go? Where's the, you know, there's no middle 8 in Lion Eyes, but there is one in Doctor My Eyes by Jackson Browne. You know what I mean? That kind of stuff. And then you just kind of compare and contrast. And like a lot of everything I was writing back then was crap, but it was just because I think in the beginning, you're just a copyist. You're just figuring out what is songwriting. And then once you start to find your comfort zone, you apply your own stamp to the limits of your own creativity, I think.
That's it.
Do you ever go back to those things that you wrote and just sort of like, would you pick them up now and see if there's anything there hiding?
I can't even look at them, Jodie. I can't.
Really?
I've tried, like, and I still know in my 15-year-old head what those melodies were, and I have to like throw the guitar in the corner and like, just can't even look at them.
Yeah, I remember one of the first songs I wrote was like it's like almost like a boy band song. It was called Safari of Love, and I was when I was about 10, so I could never want to resurface that again.
Isn't it so funny that the word love? Because one of the first ones I wrote was called This I Love, and it was about rushing to a hospital to find that the love of your life had just passed away. And I was like, I can't even think about it.
That's a strong topic for...
It's like positive topics.
I know, but it's like, you see, in my head, that's as close as I could get to Tears in Heaven. You know what I mean?
Right.
So,
yes. Yeah. Clapton, yeah.
Exactly.
And obviously, you've continued on with your songwriting and great success with that. So, what's happening at the moment with you and your music?
So, in the last year or so, probably the most formidable co-writing partnership that I've established is with Charlie McGettigan. And myself and Charlie, at the beginning of lockdown, about 3 weeks into it, when people tell these stories and they say, "Oh, he just rang one day," I'm like, he did all right, yeah. But genuinely, I remember I specifically remember the date because I'd brought out this home recorded EP on the 24th of April. He sent me a message that morning and he said, "If you fancy writing some songs together, that'd be great." So from that day on, that week on, and that was a Friday.
And obviously at this point, we need to remind people who don't know who Charlie is.
So Charlie McGettigan, I know this is one of Jodie's favorite songs, so I'm tying this around. Charlie McGettigan in 1994 won the Eurovision with Paul Harrington with the song Rock and Roll Kids. And Charlie's known for other songs like Bed for the Night and Feet of a Dancer, but he's a mainstay in terms of Irish performers and songwriters. And he got in touch with me and said, "Look, if you would like to write some songs, that'd be great." So he sent me 2 ideas and he was like,
"Did you hesitate at that point or was it an instant yes?"
Oh no, I was like, yes. But there is that part to me that's like, this is Charlie McGettigan. Like, in terms of, there's some people, you think of Shane MacGowan, Phil Lynott, Glenn Hansard, Charlie McGettigan, names who they will forever just be in the echelons of the great Irish singer-songwriters, performers. Yeah. And one of them is just after sending you a message to say, "What have you got?" So he sent me these 2 ideas. It was 2 verse ideas. One was called Nursery Rhymes and the other was called Bird of Passage. And Bird of Passage was kind of about what we were all going through. Just let the bird of passage take you on its wings. Listen to the message. There's a message in these things. It was about the idea of, we thought the pandemic was going to be like a 3-week, blow.
We were so sweet, weren't we? Like, oh, we'll just stay home, bake bread.
So naive. And then you were fecking the loaves of bread at one another around there. But so that's been like my most prolific writing relationship. I mean, to the point where we were writing 3 songs a week for the last year. And it's been about a year, almost a year now. And how I've kind of come to the country scene is in a weird roundabout way, because through Charlie, there's a couple of people on the country scene who were interested in recording songs that we'd written, but also then that has brought my music to the attention of other country artists who now are looking at my back catalogue and saying, "Okay, well, what's this guy got here?" So I'm learning names now. I'm understanding the gravity of the country scene. And like every day, it blows my mind, because I'm like, it's this monstrosity of a huge enterprise that, although I was very aware of, I never looked at it like kind of, when you see how, I watched a couple of your podcasts and I was watching you talk to Chantal Padden, and the level of focus and discipline and directness, and it's like, I'm going to do this and this and this and this, and then they do it. It just blows my mind. And I think like it, and there's so much of that on the country scene that it's just palpable, it really is.
So were you not somebody that obviously grew up going to the dances, and like, have you been to one of the country music dances?
No, to my shame, I haven't. But I would.
Copper's only been to one, so that's it. I'm going to drag you both, and so you can't jive even.
Oh, I could probably give it a go, but I mean, I got 2 left feet, Why? What am I missing out on, Jodie? Give me the lowdown.
I mean, obviously, I didn't grow up in Ireland. My family are Irish, and we would spend summers and any sort of school holidays over in Ireland. But for the Irish country community, the dances are, they're wild, aren't they, Copper? You went to see Stuart Moyles, was it you went to see?
Yeah.
And you were terrified, weren't you?
You can nearly get knocked out if you stood in the wrong place, I'd say.
Are you serious, Copper?
Yeah, they're very passionate about the dancing and the moves. They're swinging around like
and if you're not doing the dances correctly and think, I go and I just have a laugh with it all, and I, try and have fun and things. But some people are really, really passionate, and that's their life. It's their whole life. Every Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and in an afternoon they have a family dance as well. It's a whole other world. We'll have to take you.
But it's not aggro, I assume. No.
Oh, no.
Okay.
It's not like a mosh pit, although I'd nearly feel safer in a mosh pit. But
it's kind of where I thought you were going with that, Copper. I was like, I don't ever want to go to one of these things if that's what it's like. No, but there's a devoutness with country fans too. And you often see on some like certain people's videos where people will say, that's not traditional country. You're mixing that too much with like American rock and roll. There's some real purists, which like some people give that idea stick. I like it because I don't think there's an awful lot left. There's very few genres, except maybe jazz, where people would call you out and say, oh, come on, like, that's not a straight country song. Or by straight country song, I mean, that's taken more influence from, say, jazz or blues or R&B and that kind of thing. Which is fine, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think it's interesting that even on the Irish scene, that there's still these purists who are like, that's not quite that authentic. It's very interesting.
People don't like it if somebody releases just a pop record. It's like, oh no, that's it. They're not allowed back in the country scene now. They've left us, and it's straight. It's wild. It really is.
It reminds me a lot of, like, I'm a huge Bob Dylan fan, and in 1965 when he turned electric at Newport Folk Festival, and he was literally, it was like, that's it, you're gone.
Almost like a riot. It's like, what are you doing with that electric guitar?
It's unbelievable. And like, I feel, but it's kind of cool that's still there. Kind of like
music has to keep evolving. You have to take influences from different genres and kind of evolve and improve all the time. And if it's just if it's stayed one way for decades, then it's kind of going to get stale, and have to evolve. But like, I suppose, what would you describe your genre of music as being? Because I could say you're kind of folky rock and roll, but what would you describe yourself? It's kind of hard to pinpoint you, even though it's not necessarily the best thing in the world to pinpoint a genre. But what would you say yourself?
It's tricky because I was hugely influenced by growing up, and with my music teacher, I was very much influenced by the Great American Songbook. So people like Jerome Kern, George and Ira Gershwin, like the music of the 1920s and 30s. So jazz and swing and ragtime and that kind of stuff. But I think at the heart of what I do, when it all comes out, or at least the music that I've released, you could probably describe as like folk alt country. Like there's definitely, on my debut album, there's songs like Honeybee and Something's Missing that are like straight out of the Merle Haggard influence book. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's probably the best way I could describe it.
Also, you've already answered part of this, but obviously you've got all these new songs that have been written over lockdown. What is the plan for those? Are they for other people? Are you going to be doing another album?
So some of them will be for other people. Like there's some, Charlie regularly, Jodie, will get people who'll be like, have you got some songs for me? From different people. And particularly on the country scene, which I find interesting.
Any names you could name?
Oh, God. I thought about this before I came on, right? And I thought, this is going to be the thing where the guy is about to sign the contract and he's like, damn that Gavin fella, I'm not going to do it, So I'm just kind of afraid. You know when people say...
You can tell us off camera, it's fine.
Yeah. I'll tell you off camera, yeah. Like, you know when people say, I've got this really exciting stuff coming up, but I can't tell you anything about it. I used to think, of course you can. But this is where, because there's more than just me, I would be a little bit reluctant to. But there are a few, and they're I know their names that you know. So
it's not Copy Kelly, is it?
Hush, Joe.
Got to keep some things a surprise, Joe. But no, myself and Charlie at some point in the year will release an EP of the songs recorded by ourselves as well. So like maybe 5 or 6 of the songs that we particularly like or we're fond of, and I've got an EP of my own tunes coming out at the end of May called the 1992 tapes, and it's just me and an upright piano, and that's it. So it's a vocal piano record, 5 songs. That'll be at the end of May.
Yeah.
And was that recorded during lockdown?
It hasn't been recorded yet.
Oh wow!
So I love this idea, the John Lennon idea of recorded on the Monday, bring it out on the Friday. Now it's not going to be that close, but at the end of April, I'll be recording the last 3 songs on it, and it'll come out at the end of May.
Wow!
Oh, you're saying you're outside you can't get to the studio at the moment. You're kind of outside of the 5 km limit, but you've been at home writing furiously anyway, and carding voice memos and that kind of stuff, keeping going anyway. All
that kind of stuff, yeah. And it's like nothing. The big thing at the moment that people all complain about, or not complain about, but kind of empathize with, is the idea that there's no live gigs, which is brutal. And it's almost come to the point where this is the longest period in my adult life where I've not gigged. But it's been the longest period of prolonged writing and collaboration and podcasts and interviews and stuff like that. So in a way, all of this stuff has to happen. I'm trying to look at it as positively as possible.
Yeah.
But all of this stuff has to happen at some point anyway. So it might as well all happen in one prolonged burst and then have a couple of years of just riding that creativity.
But do you remember what a gig is and what to do when you get to a gig and things?
Kind of. I probably forget how to work a PA system at this stage, but
yeah,
putting a set list together, I think I could still do.
Well, I think at this point is where we will turn over to Copper's Corner.
Yes.
So we will get Copper to get his pipe out and sit down for a story is what it sounds like we're going to be doing.
I must still have to
Sounds good.
source myself a pipe. I must get myself one. I must go on eBay after this or something. But
Awesome,
yes,
Copper.
come join me in my corner here and ask you a few kind of random questions. But you've listened to the podcast already, so you kind of know what to expect, I think. But tell me, what was your first CD that you ever bought? When you were busking and earning your coppers and getting in and into the Tower Records or wherever you were going.
I think it was Bob Dylan Unplugged.
Yeah.
Or Blood on the Tracks, one or the other. Yeah. Hard to pin it down, but it was definitely one of those two. Yeah.
So he's a big influence on you, obviously, in your songwriting style.
But the biggest, far and away. He would have been the reason that I ever picked up a guitar copper, you know?
Perfect. And if you were to have a dinner and you were to invite some guests, 3 guests, dead or alive, anytime throughout history, who would you invite and why?
Jodie Lucas, Copper Kelly, and Charlie
I like that I was first.
You're the first now to invite us. Fair play.
Really? No one has done that before?
No. To be fair, Tina D. Parton, when I said that, she said that she knows I don't need an invite and I just turn up whenever I like to.
I know, but it's nice to be invited as well. You know?
But
who was the third one?
Who are your real 3 now?
Charlie McGettigan.
Charlie McGettigan. Fair enough.
Who are my real 3? So alive or dead? They don't have
alive
to
or
be.
dead? It could be King Tutankhamun if you want.
I would love to sit down with like some of the surrealist painters. So like
Dali,
Pablo Picasso, Dali.
Wow.
Yes, Salvador Dali, Pablo Picasso, and maybe like one of the French surrealist writers like André Breton, Louis Aragon, people like that. I think that'd be amazing. Just because, or people like James Joyce or Beckett, you know, figures who there isn't anyone who's even alive now that has a connection to that time. Do you know what I mean? Who would have known them or that kind of thing. You know, that'd be really cool.
That'd be cool.
Wow.
Absolutely. And if we were to have a karaoke night and, you know, we had a few pints in us and we're having a great time and you're handed the microphone, what would be the first song that you'd sing?
Oh, probably Sweet Caroline or something.
Yeah.
I
You
would
get everyone
imagine so.
going.
Exactly. Yeah. That's when my own personal taste goes out the window and you just have to, you know, sing whatever feels appropriate.
Yeah.
And obviously you're full on into the music and songwriting. But if that wasn't a part of your life, for whatever reason, what would you think you'd be doing?
Probably be a doctor.
A doctor.
Wow.
I don't know why, but I've always found like the doctors in my life, not that there have been many, but my GP when I was younger, Declan Herbert, was just the most reassuring, life-affirming man. And I feel like people who, when they can be that, it's an incredible gift to be, and to be involved with medicine that makes people better, whether it's even something just like eczema. You know what I mean? I think it's an incredible thing. So probably that. Like, I think if I was the type who would have been pushed by what my folks would have said, I would have been too afraid to do something creative, and I would have got into something like, you know, like a proper job.
Yeah.
Like being a doctor or a lawyer, that kind of thing. But doctor probably. Yeah.
That's a good one. That's interesting. And what was the last gig that you went to that you actually bought a ticket for and went to before you couldn't go to gigs anymore?
The last gig, it was kind of a combination because I supported Keela on the 7th of March, but it was also the last gig I was at because I watched their set on the side of the stage afterwards. So it was it was a combination of the two. Feels like.
What did you last buy a ticket for?
Oh, like a big thing, like in the National Concert Hall, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. I really don't know. I go to that many, and that, you know, you're never conscious of these things until it stops. And with lockdown and quarantine and all that type of stuff, it wasn't like anybody was counting up until that point. And then all of a sudden it's like, boom. So I can't actually remember, but we'll say Keela.
Okay, that's fair enough. And I suppose my last question You might have been expecting this one, but do you have any ghost stories for us?
Ghost stories. There's an Irish cultural centre in the centre of Clondalkin. It's definitely over 100 years old anyway. And I remember that's where the Keela gig was. Like, they host a lot of gigs. There's the big holla to the end of the building. And they say that there's a couple of ghouls that haunt the place. But I have been in there late at night. I've never seen anything. By God, it's an old mansion house. And you hear doors banging and mops falling over and all this type of stuff. It is a little bit spooky, but I've never come face to face with something.
Oh, okay.
What would you do if you did?
Don't know. I don't know whether it
a cup would be flying at it.
It's just one of those things, you know. Have you guys got any good ghost stories?
Copper's the one. Copper loves the ghost stories, don't you, Copper? You used to work in a haunted house, didn't you?
I did. I used to work in Loftus Hall down here in Wexford.
Wow.
Have you heard of that place?
Wow.
Have you?
Yeah.
So I was working there for nearly a year, I suppose. And I've had things where doors closed on me and things like that. I have there's a whole story. I won't go into it now. It's a bit long, but it's
got a whole episode that's just his story, to be fair, haven't you?
But it's the only supernatural experience I've had. And I was there for nearly a year in the dark at night on my own, all this kind of stuff. But there's just one time, it was in the middle of the day when these doors start slamming at like precise moments. And they kind of did it a few times. I'll say no more. But it was an interesting one. And
there's nothing you can attribute it to other than...
Not really.
Wow.
No.
But he did what I wouldn't do, and you went running towards the noise, didn't you? Whereas I would be running the opposite way.
Yeah, I'd probably run towards it too. Just out of pure curiosity, I'd have to.
Yeah. So it's like kind of mad to experience something. Like, I'm working in this haunted house, that's the best opportunity you're going to get to see anything, if there is anything. So it's kind of, hey, crap, there's something. Maybe I'll go and see what it is.
And
investigate.
Are you Copper by birth, or is it because you're involved with the police?
Yeah. Oh, no, sure. Yeah. No, it's an old a moniker I took upon myself, I suppose you could say.
You can tell this. Actually, we've never told the story on the podcast.
Tell the story.
So here we go. Tell the story of how the name Copper Kelly came to be, because I know you've only done this in one interview, and you did it on a newspaper interview. Was it the Sunday World? No, it was the Irish World.
Irish World,
paper, wasn't it? Yeah, you told this.
It's not, it's a story. It's sorry, but
I built it up now, haven't I?
You have, yeah.
Go for a Copper. We're all friends here.
It's suddenly the podcast about me. But I was in Edinburgh with a few mates, and I was thinking, this is a good few years ago, and I was thinking, lads, I'm thinking of doing this, this music thing, properly, have a good go at it. But I'm not happy with my own name. It's a bit boring. It's I'll even say it, you'll forget it in 2 seconds. But
we'll tell you off camera.
Okay.
But I said to my mate, we'll make up some sort of a stage name or whatever. And he goes, what's your porn star name generator? So the name of your first pet and your mother's maiden name. Copper Kelly. That's it. Done in 2 seconds. Name.
And it's stuck. But then you get Cooper Kelly a lot, don't you?
Yeah, Cooper. People don't get the copper part and they think Cooper, and
I call you Coops, which really annoys you.
Especially in the States, because Cooper is such a common first name. But I thought maybe it was like a Machine Gun Kelly reference, and that maybe in a period in your life you spent in the army, and Copper was like your, like your flight, like Maverick, like your flight name.
Yeah. That could be my story from now on, I suppose.
You can tell it from now on like that, Copper.
Yeah. Try and build it up a bit.
That's it. But Joe, do you have any more questions before we round out?
So I think just to sort of finish off, obviously you're saying there you've got some new stuff coming out end of March, all being well. I presume people can find all of that on your social. So where can people find you? Not your address. We don't want people turning up at the house, knocking the door.
The postcode there.
We've had issues like that before, so we're trying to avoid that kind of thing. No, so Colm Gavin Music on Facebook is usually a good go-to, but Instagram is probably where I'm most active at the moment. So just Colm Gavin, all one word on Instagram. That's usually a good go-to spot. So somewhere between the end of May, that'll be my record at the end of May. And then somewhere in the summer, myself and Charlie will get together whenever lockdown permits it and get in the studio and record some of these songs, which I'm really looking forward to. But because he's just such, like, he's one of those guys who, they say don't meet your heroes. He's the most honest, straight ahead, kind, giving of his time, well-rounded.
Have you managed to meet in person through this?
No, never.
Wow.
in a year. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so weird. It's so much, Jodie, to the point we've never even spoken on the phone.
Oh, it's all text.
Mm.
Yeah.
How do you know it's him?
Oh no, it's him. It's him. In fact, what's nice about it is a lot of what he's done too, like I said earlier, has kind of opened up my music to a kind of a different world, because he's been on with Marty Morrissey and Ryan Tuberty, and he'll always drop the name and say, I'm working with a young fella called Colm Gavin at the moment, and we're writing some songs together. So he's been unbelievably supportive, and very cool guy.
Amazing. I can't wait to hear it. And I was going to say, hopefully you could introduce me one day, but you haven't met him yourself yet. So.
Well, maybe the day I need him, you'll just happen to be there.
I'll just turn up. I could come and host it for you, the meeting.
Like, this is my agent, Jodie Lucas. She's brought my career to otherworldly brilliant places, and here we are.
See, I'd go to the opening of anything. Somebody said to me once, Jodie would go to the opening of an envelope if she was invited. And I was like, yes, I would, because I think you should say yes to everything, because you never know.
I think at the moment anybody would, go to the opening of a packet of biscuits at this stage, because it's been so long since we've been out to do anything,
That's it.
So I think that completes our episode with Colm Gavin. We will link, obviously, all your socials and where they can find your music and everything underneath. But from me and Copper, that was very, very enjoyable to learn a bit more about you, Colm. And
thank you very much for coming on, Colm.
Hopefully you'll come back one day and we can talk about everything else that you've been doing since now, and we'll be having a bit more of an exciting life than we're living right now.
Pleasure. Jodie, Copper, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure to talk with you. Pleasure.
Thanks. We'll talk to you again soon, hopefully.
Thank you. Take care, guys. Take care.
And you.
So that was our chat with Colm Gavin. Very interesting conversation. And I think there's going to be great things to come from his songwriting partnership that he told us about. But I suppose this week, since I'm on my own for the intro and outro, we have no hot track of the week or whatever. What do they call it? Single of the week, I think we call it. So we'll get to that again next week when Jodie's back. But if you want to follow us on those socials and see what we're up to, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and all those good places. Just search Copper Kelly Music, and you can find my website, copperkelly.com. Also I have music on Spotify, iTunes, all those good places. And you can find Jodie on Instagram and Facebook and all those places as well. It's Welcome to Jodie Land. And on Twitter, it's Welcome to Jodie. And of course, the podcast. You can find us Folkin Around Podcasts on Facebook and Instagram. And let us know what you'd like to see from us in the future. I suppose if you have any email or any messages for us, you can always email us on folkinaroundpodcast@gmail.com. We're nice and easy to get in contact to it. So don't be afraid to let us know what you're thinking or what you'd like to hear from us in the future. But for now, I suppose I'll let you know our interview next week is with a young singer called Jamie Donnelly. And it was a great conversation we recorded there a few weeks ago, and really looking forward to putting that out. And you might notice as well, we're going to start releasing our episodes on a Monday morning instead of Friday. It just seems to be a better time for podcasts to go out in general, I think. And the YouTube video will be up on a Monday evening then. But yeah, that's the podcast for this week. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time. But for now, bye, folkers.